In the first chapter of the Tanisho, Shinran is quoted as saying, "We should know that Amida's original vow does not discriminate whether one is young or old, good or evil, and that faith alone is of supreme importance. For it is the vow that seeks to save the sentient beings burdened with grave sins and fiery passions. Therefore, if we have faith in the original vow, no other good is needed, because there is no good surpassing the Nembutsu. Nor should evil be feared, because there is no evil capable of obstructing Amida's original vow." Thus it was said. Namandab, namandab, namandab. Good morning, everyone. Today is what I consider a minor major service. But I can confidently say that I don't think there's any other temple in the world that's observing this service today. This is BCA Founding Day and Sochoki, or Past Bishop Memorial service. And this is a uniquely BCA service in number one, right? So they wouldn't be observing it any place else outside of BCA. And actually the Sochoki, or Past Bishop's Memorial, is supposed to be observed the first weekend in June. And then the BCA Founding Day is actually September, the first weekend in September. So for some reason we observe it in October here, and so I can confidently say I don't think anybody else in the whole world is observing this service today. But it began as the Sochoki part began as a memorial, as Joyce mentioned, for Bishop Matsukage and Bishop Shigefuji, who passed away in office. The job killed them. And it was later expanded to all the bishops who have since passed away. And then BCA Founding Day is supposed to be observed on the first weekend in September and marks the incorporation, not the very beginning, but the incorporation of the forerunner to the BCA that we have today. The current BCA was established in the camps, okay? Because up until then it was the Honganji Hokubei Kyodan, the Honganji North American District. And then it was established in the camps as the BCA, and then it's gone through a number of bylaws changes since. And I can kind of understand why the BCA Founding Day was changed, since, the beginning of September you have Labor Day, and then you have the Dharma school coming back and such. And, it's probably more convenient to hold it now. And then the Bishop's Memorial service was probably changed because you have graduation, baccalaureate services and stuff like that in June. So there was a conflict. But why you picked October, I have no idea. And I'm still trying to get a feel for this and see what we can do to try to get things back on schedule. But, I don't know if there was a good reason to have it in October, but there had to be a reason. There had to be some reason, and we can try to figure that out and build from there. But when we consider the first ministers and bishops who came over, we need to try to get a vision, or an understanding of what the world was like when they first came over. They came over from a world that was just getting away from the world of the samurai. So, they probably grew up seeing people walking around with swords and stuff like that all the time. And then they came to a world here where people are still walking around with six-shooters and riding horses and carriages, right? You try to picture that, and it must have been a culture shock for them. And most of the people who first came over to the Japanese who came over to the United States came at that time. And most were young men, primarily teenagers on the most part. The old guys in the society were in their 20s, right? Those were the old guys. And they left their family and friends to come to the United States to make their fortune, and their idea was to return home. And, this all sounds like a fairy tale, and it was for most of them. Very few were able to do that. And when you have people, young people, being frustrated in life, and primarily young men, right? And they're walking around in groups looking for jobs, going from place to place, because they couldn't, really they didn't have any other options too much. They had to walk from place to place. they're going to get frustrated, right? They're going to be frustrated. And when they're walking around like that and people in the society see them, you know, how would they feel? How would they feel? When we think about how we feel when we see a bunch of young guys walking that look kind of towards us kind of different, kind of grubby looking, frustrated, you know, kind of aimless, we get scared, right? We get scared. And when we see people like that and they see us seeing them and reacting to them in that way, they're going to act in a way that they think they should, which isn't usually very good. And so they were looked upon as strange and potentially dangerous group, and by many of the people around them. So a lot of them took actions in their life that probably weren't the best, you know, like all these old Japanese towns that they had in, especially rural areas. You know, they had the boarding houses. They also had gambling houses and stuff like that there, right? So all of these things were going on. And because of this, the Christian missionaries saw this as a potentially good group to focus upon, right? And then when this started happening, some of the older guys, the ones in their 20s, said, this isn't right. You know, we have a beautiful religious tradition back home. And we need to have them come and help us straighten out all these young guys. You know, basically, this is the kind of thinking that went through. And so they sent a letter to the Honganji and asked them to, you know, send ministers over, actually send missionaries over. Actually, the term kaikyoshi, what we're formerly referred to, means missionary, right? And I'm supposed to save you heathens. But the whole idea was, you know, they were sent over, and the first ones that were sent over came to explore and look at the situation themselves and report back to Japan. And again, this is right after the restoration of the emperor in Japan, so, you know, it was shortly after. But these were people who spoke English, right? And later on, they became great leaders, not in just you know, our Honganji tradition, but in Japan, right? And they came, and not only did they check things out, they actually stood on street corners preaching in English to people, right? And this is how we got started. This is how we got started. They came and they decided that they would go out and, you know, we recommend to the Honganji that ministers be sent over. Right? This is what they did. A lot of these people became ambassadors to Europe. A lot of them became heads of the first universities in Japan. And they were very good people. You know, they were very qualified and capable people.